Okay, cool. So today what I'm going to be doing is breaking down the entire concept of how to detox the body. When I first started my journey, this is actually the topic that I focused on the most. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, what I did, and then why I kind of transitioned from that being my main topic to now being not necessarily a secondary, but there's a first step that we have to do prior to this. So this is also going to be kind of like a little bit of a book study, session. So I'm going to be going over, this book, one of the chapters that really helped me out to understand a lot of the things that, we're going through. And I'm also going to expand on it and add a lot more, to some of the things that I learned. So hope that you guys are excited for this. Let me see who is live here right now. All right, I'm pulling up the comments. Cool. So let me go ahead and get started with this. So when I first started out my journey, understand that I started out really just thinking about gut health in general. Okay, my big epiphany, and as people ask me like, hey, what's this beer diet, project all about? I tell people, here's the deal. Like I had all of these issues, right? I was, tired. My hair was falling off and, realized that it was an autoimmune condition. And then I learned that 80% of your immune system is your gut. And what made sense at that point was that when I heard 80% of your immune system is in your gut, and then I made that connection that your immune system is basically probiotics, yeast, and bacteria. That's when a light bulb went off in my head because I used to teach how to brew beer. And as a brewer, what I would do is basically grow yeast and bacteria, which are probiotics. And so this is when I started to do things to improve my health that basically were things that I learned from brewing beer, like improving the quality of water, adding minerals to my diet, dealing with the pH, the temperature, and then, of course, the overall health of yeast and bacteria. And that's how I kind of came up with the name Beer Diet Project, because the things that I was doing were things that no doctor was telling me about. A lot of the things that I talk about, and when I first started sharing, there wasn't really much information online about some of these specific topics, and especially like there's still some topics that I talk about that I don't really see much about, especially the ones where it's mostly me coming up with theories and hypotheses, which I'll be sharing a lot more of these during our coaching program, because I think like once you start to experience some of this, I'll point out to like, hey, have you experienced these changes and that kind of thing, and then I'll explain kind of like what I think is going on, and you'll get a little bit of that in this training that I'm doing today. But anyway, so as I was going through this whole situation, um, I realized, okay, I need to clean out my gut. And that's where I started to detox. And I started with like juice fasting and doing all these things. But there was something that happened that I didn't realize was going to happen. And I was not aware of, because I was learning, I was pioneering a lot of these things that I'm sharing with you at the time. So, like when I was going through, I didn't have someone telling me like, hey, this is what you do. This is a step by step. Some of these books that I'm showing you now, like they weren't around when I first started. And so I was really just, kind of experimenting, doing things on my own. And so this video that I'm making for you today is really meant to um, prevent and maybe keep you from making some of the same mistakes that I made earlier on when I first started my journey. So to get started, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about how the body is meant to detox. And once you understand this whole detox process, things are going to make a lot more sense as far as why I'm having people do the steps that I share, why I emphasize certain steps before other steps, and then we'll go from there. So let me get my tablet here set up and share my screen. So, all right. Sharing my desktop. Cool. So there's that. All right. So very first thing that I want to talk about and point out is that our main detox organ is the liver. Okay. And the more you understand and pay attention to what the liver does, the function of the liver, the more that you're going to be able to, navigate through this whole scenario. And the one thing that I want to point out more than anything, if I can draw a stick figure here, is that most of the toxic waste that your body gets comes from your gut. Okay. Now, ideally, and really at the end of the day, what I do is essentially I optimize my microbiome. Like when I talk about like habits that I do, like drinking water, I'm adding minerals, doing vitamin D supplements and all of these other things that I do, all of that to some extent, like it's kind of like pointed right back into optimizing the microbiome, because I know that it's the microbiome that makes hormones. I know that it's the microbiome that digests food for you, that uptakes nutrients for you. I know that it's the microbiome that does so many functions that it's really like possibly the most important thing that we need to do to take care of our health, right? That's why 80% of your immune system depends on your microbiome. Now, the thing about the microbiome is that when you start to detox, and or even before you start to detox, with all the toxic waste that is produced, all that toxic waste is all over your body, right? And so I want you to think about toxic waste as really like that body fat, right? So whenever I see people growing a beer belly, like even when I had my beer belly growing, basically now when I look at that, what I see, I don't see people who have body fat. I don't see people who are, like overweight. What I see is people who are toxic and who have essentially lost the ability to get rid of toxic waste out of their body. So what I started to understand was the importance of the liver is that when your gut starts to produce too much toxic waste, your liver is just like a drain, right? And if this is a drain, if it starts to get clogged, right? If you get too much toxic waste trying to leave the body via the liver, it can get to a point where it gets clogged and then it overflows. And once it overflows, it ends up back in the bloodstream, and now it's basically distributed all over the body. And that's basically how you get body fat in different parts of your body, where you're like, why is this part of my body growing? And where, that's basically how that distribution happens. And so essentially what I aim to do is, at the end of the day, in order to stop a lot of the toxic waste, you want to detox your gut. But when you detox your gut, you need to have a way to remove that toxic waste, and that's going to happen to the liver. So the key takeaway here is that if you try to detox your body without detoxing the liver first, more than likely you're going to end up with a clogged liver, and that's going to actually make matters worse, because that's going to, number one, not going to allow you to get rid of toxins fully. And not only that, it's now going to be distributing all of those toxins all over the body. And in my case, I had elevated liver enzymes. Okay, my liver was so toxic. I had elevated liver enzymes, and I ended up breaking out in hives. Like when a mosquito bites you, and you get that itchy skin, and your skin kind of like goes up. Like literally, like 2/3 of my body, if not more, were like broke out in hives. Like I was just itching. It was like just so painful. It was like one of the worst things that's ever happened to me. And a lot of that happened because I was detoxing too aggressively and I wasn't paying attention to the liver, right? Now, the other thing that you have to understand is that if you have autoimmune conditions, chances are that your liver is super toxic. And when you start to understand like the actual functions of the liver actually converts thyroid hormone T4 into T3, right? The liver metabolizes a lot of your fats, right? So a lot of your healthy fats that you're supposed to eat for like vitamin D, vitamins A, D, E, and K, which are the vitamins that your body uses for hormone production. A lot of that happens in your liver. And if your liver is toxic, then you're not going to be performing or functioning the way that you are supposed to, the way that you are supposed to. And not only that, but it's also going to inhibit your body from digesting foods that give you nutrients that are key nutrients, not only for your body to function, but also for your microbiome. Okay. And this is really where the issue comes in for a lot of people, is that a lot of people have a gut so toxic, a poor microbiome, that they have problems with nutrient absorption. And after all of these years, what I've found is that if you just try to like supplement your body with some of these nutrients, your body's more than likely not going to uptake a lot of them. Okay. And this is where I start to, break down this process and, like, okay, the most important part really is probiotics, fixing your gut health. But you cannot grow probiotics in a toxic environment. Okay. So this is why, I get a lot of people sometimes that, come to me and they seem to like know everything that I know. They tell me like, oh yeah, I know all about probiotics. I know all about vitamin D. I know all about, these are people that apparently know it all, but yet they don't have any results to show for their knowledge. And the reason is because a lot of times they just don't understand that there's a specific order that you have to go through in order to actually optimize your microbiome, right? That's basically what I did as a brewer. And that's why I understand that, hey, can you take probiotics and feel a difference when your gut is toxic? Sure, you might feel a little bit of relief, but it's not the ideal way, because if your gut is toxic, the environment is toxic, you're not going to grow the best probiotics. And so, before we get into growing probiotics, what I would basically focus on is detoxing, right? And then with detoxing, we can break this down into two categories. The most important one will be gut, but again, you cannot go and detox your gut, because a lot of things that you're going to be doing to detox your gut, like for example, fasting is one of the best tools that you can use, but most people can't start there. And again, remember, when I started, this is where I started. Okay. That was, one of the mistakes again. And it's not so much it was a mistake, but I'm telling you, like, it made the process and the journey rough, to say the least. Like, it made it rough. Right. And so, can you start out here? Sure. But I'm telling you right now, it is rough. And that's not the way that you want to do it. The proper way to do it is to first focus on your liver. Okay. And then there's a step before that, which is once you start to understand, what toxic waste does to your body, it literally is what keeps cells of your body from growing and replicating in a healthy way. And so you have to think of anytime that you're detoxing, you're going to have to go in and repair cells. Okay. So if your liver has been toxic, you're not just going to clean it up and be like, okay, now you're good. No, you're going to clean it up, but now you're going to be left with the damage, right? And, I think of, toxic waste like rust on cables, right? So think of, your cells, you have like all these, conductive minerals that are now rusted. You have to go in and fix that, right? And so that's where I started to, put together what is now becoming like basically like the entry point for everyone, which is what I'm going to call the energy jumpstart. And this is where I went in and started to pay attention to say, okay, no matter what, in order to properly detox the liver, you need to not only clean it up, but you also have to regenerate it. Okay, you have to make sure that the cells of the liver regenerate, they replicate, and they replicate in a healthy way. And that's where I realized that I shouldn't be, having people essentially start out with any of these detoxes if they haven't built a foundation, if they haven't have if they haven't developed a habit of drinking water, adding minerals to it, and having enough vitamin D in their system so that their body can actually regenerate and replicate the cells of, damaged different organs throughout your body as you start going through some of these detoxes, right? Water, for example, every cell of your body, like if it's not hydrated, it's not going to be able to produce as much energy. And there's that relationship between what I call your mitochondrial function, basically every cell of your body that produces energy. The more that they produce energy, the healthier your microbiome is. The less they produce energy, the poorer, the more unhealthy your microbiome is, and then vice versa. The worse your microbiome is, the poorer your mitochondrial function is, the less energy you produce, right? And this is what puts people into that vicious cycle of, like, they have a toxic gut, so now they can't get nutrients. The nutrients doesn't allow them to produce energy, and because they're not producing energy, they're not basically strengthening their immune system. And so now, like, no matter what they seem to eat, even if they switch to good foods, they're not going to really experience much of a difference until they start to address these issues, right? So that's why it's important to go through a 30-day hydration challenge, drink water, do all the minerals, and get all the vitamin D in that you can, because then and only then can you actually go and start a liver detox, which, in our program, we use Ayurvedic herbs. And alongside with that, we use coenzyme Q10. And the reason why we use coenzyme Q10 is because coenzyme Q10 is basically what sparks on your mitochondria. Okay. And what you have to understand is that the way that parasites, bad bacteria, and all of the stuff that lives in your gut that shouldn't be in there, the way that a lot of them work, like viruses, for example, is a lot of these rely on the energy that your body produces, right? That's why parasites are called parasites. They basically live off of you. And so your body has, like, this mechanism, like this safety mechanism, to where, if all of a sudden, like, you have a parasite, well, if it continues to produce energy, it's feeding your parasites, and it's not, you're not getting that energy. But not only that, it knows that that parasite is basically growing and replicating even more. And so it shuts down mitochondrial function to prevent that from happening. And when it shuts down mitochondrial function, it basically transitions over into fighting off disease. But again, if your body is too toxic, if you don't have a strong enough immune system, that's where those conditions happen. Like, that's where that vicious cycle begins. And so on a liver detox, what you want to do is use the Ayurvedic herbs to clean, and then you want to use coenzyme Q10 as the nutrient, right, that your body needs. That's like the first nutrient to kind of like spark things on, to kind of like get the wheels turning again. And then from here on, you can now start to add, like, the actual foods and nutrients that your body is truly going to need to regenerate your liver. But before I get into the foods, let's talk about cleaning up your liver. And not just your liver, but really overall toxic waste, how it happens in your body. Understand that we live in a world that it's crazy. Like, when you think about it, like when you look around, especially as you start learning more about this, how artificial our world really is. And it's so funny, it's ridiculous. Like, um you have people, for example, who, if you were to give them, a glass of milk, and the glass of milk is coming straight out of, a cow, there's so many people that will actually look at that and be grossed out and wouldn't really drink it. Yet they would go to the store and they will buy pasteurized milk, which basically, pasteurized means you kill all of the good bacteria, all the probiotics, all the digestive enzymes that milk is supposed to have. Not only that, that milk is coming from mostly unhealthy cows, which have a ton of bad things already in them. And they tend to get 2% or skim milk, which basically removes a lot of, like, the good, healthy part of the milk, which is the fat part of the milk. right? And they have no problem eating that, right? And then they add that to like their sugar Latin Lucky Charms or cinnamon toast crunch or whatever. Which these were my favorite cereals growing up, right? Like I'm talking like that used to be me as well. And the funny thing is that a lot of that stuff seems normal because when you grow up in that environment and that's what you see, you don't think much of it. But as you begin to learn a lot of this information, you start to like kind of like take a step back and look and see how disconnected we become from our food, to the point where things that are not good for you seem to be normal and you don't think twice about it, right? So, a lot of times people are exposed to things like mold, and mold can be everywhere. It can be in office buildings, it can be in your house, it can be in a lot of different things. And mold is one of the toxins that tends to be in a lot of people. And so this is something that you have to learn about to see if this may be one of the things that may be causing you toxic overload. Xenoestrogens, these are things that are found in things like plastics. These are things that I mean, they're everywhere, and basically what they are is they're chemicals that mimic estrogen, right? So sometimes you a lot of people experience there's this testosterone to estrogen ratio where your estrogen ratio is much higher than your testosterone. Oftentimes, what can trigger that is heavy exposure to xenoestrogens, right? Because they mimic estrogen. And this is another reason why it is way more common for women to experience a lot of these issues, because you already produce a lot more estrogen than men do. But this is like one of those areas where if you're using a lot of plastics, if you're using there's even in like toothpaste or personal care products, like you find a lot of that stuff in here. Triclosan, it's another one that's found in a lot of antibacterial soaps, right? So a lot of people think, antibacterial soap, that's another one where people think that, hey, it's normal to get rid of bacteria, right? Let's kill all bacteria kind of thing. Well, not really. I mean, remember, bacteria, there's both good bacteria and bad bacteria. You want to get rid of bad, you can't really get rid of it all. Like there's going to be still some within your body as part of the ecosystem, but you want to keep it down to a minimum, and you want to boost and improve all of your good bacteria. And you don't even realize, but a lot of these personal care products, soaps, this is even found in like some toothpastes, right? You're being exposed to a lot of this toxic waste, BPA. That's bisphenol A is found in a lot of plastics. And again, a lot of these industries, packaging industries, they are aware that there are people out there that are teaching things like this, like, hey, avoid BPA, bisphenol A products and things like that. And they come up with new things that are just as toxic. And instead of using BPA, they'll use like bisphenol F or something else, and then they'll label it, oh, BPA free, but they're using something else that's just as toxic, right? And so you have to become aware of this, and you have to like stay up to date. Oftentimes, heavy metals. This is a huge one, and halogens. I'm going to talk a little bit more about halogens right now, because this is kind of part of phase one, where you're talking about water. This is one of the first one that I kind of became aware of, where I'm like, there's a reason why in the brewing process we look for water that doesn't have chlorine, right? There's all of these components that are usually found in your water. And it's interesting because cities and whatever, I don't know what you call them, laws or whatever you want to call them, will say that water may be suitable for drinking, right? But in some brewing books, there's a distinction where we make like, even though this is suitable for drinking, it's not for brewing. But in my book, like where like with everything that I know, I think about it like, there's a reason why I can't brew with water that has chlorine or chloramines. And that's because that affects yeast growth, right? And yeast, in this case, I'm talking about good yeast, which is a probiotic. If I can't brew beer with it because it affects probiotics, what makes someone else think that water that has any of these halogens is suitable for drinking, right? That boggles my mind. And, I personally, you can debate it, you can fight it, argue it. I don't care what anyone says. I get distilled water for drinking water because I don't want any of these chemicals. If I'm looking to optimize my microbiome, I'm going to look for the cleanest source of water there is, right? This is where Beer Diet Project comes into place, where like I pay attention to these things, whereas most people, you ask most people, it's like, hey, is your water clean? Most people can't tell you. And most people can't even tell you, like, what does it mean to have clean water, right? And this is, for me, this is basically what it means to have clean water is basically if it's not just literally pure H2O, which I do by getting a distilling water machine, remove everything. It's just nothing but water. That's basically where this comes in. Understand that a lot of these halogens, they displace, iodine. And this is one of the things that can actually affect, thyroid function, right? So a lot of these things you can kind of like start to see that it's just toxic stuff that you have to learn, be aware of. Personal care products, women get hit hard with these, especially because of makeup. There's like lead in a lot of like lipstick. There's so much junk and toxic waste in a lot of, personal products, especially, makeup and products geared to women, that all of that, understand that that ends up in your body and your liver needs to get rid of it. Okay. And the reason why I point this out is because one of the things that I do, one of the things that I consider myself doing is basically I create habits in my life to keep myself healthy, right? Like drinking more water, adding minerals. The other habits that I, am developing is basically I do a liver cleanse, right? So that's basically the Ayurvedic herbs that I share that I just talked about and the coenzyme Q10. I do these about, every other month, maybe every, at least like once a quarter. And, that's just as a habit, right? That's just as a habit because it's not just the food that you eat. It's basically things that you're exposed to on a daily basis. You live in a city, you're breathing car exhaust, right? So that's toxic. Um, there's so many ways that your body can become toxic. And so, this is just maintenance. Your liver is a filter, right? Just like your lungs, that's a filter. That's your air filter. You have to change out the oil and kind of like replace the filter every so often. This is basically what this is. It's just routine maintenance. And again, these to me are not supplements. Ayurvedic herbs are herbs, they're plants, and something I'm going to be talking about more, in my advanced programs, when we start talking more about understanding food and understanding, there's a difference between conventional food, organic food. You have superfoods, you have heirloom food, then you have like living foods, and then you have heirloom, and then you have like nutrimedicinal foods. These are falling into that nutrimedicinal foods kind of stage, and then it goes even beyond from there, which is where fermentation takes a lot of these foods into, turns them into like super potent elixirs, which is, an area of study that I'm going to be, dedicating. I don't know. I mean, this is basically what Beer Diet Project is for me. Is like I want to understand food like at such a level that, this is just kind of like the beginning for, for you guys to see like where my journey started, so that later on when I start publishing a lot more information on like the heavy, more advanced stuff, you guys understand, like why, and how I got there kind of thing. But anyway, so that's basically what this is doing. So understand that as you begin to clean up your body, you start to detox, you're going to start to get into this idea that, you're doing this detoxing, you're falling into these routines, all these habits. It's going to be a lot harder for you to eat junk food and basically put toxins back into your body, because you're not, you're just going to know like you're undoing work, right? And so the more that you understand this, the more likely you are to actually get into a routine and a habit that actually keeps you and moves you forward. So first step, you are removing toxic waste. And so we're gonna start talking more about food right now. But before I do that, let me check in with you guys here on Facebook and see where you're at. See if this stuff is making sense so far. So if you guys are live, let me know if you guys understand the importance of following an order, meaning you got to strengthen your body first, strengthen your immune system with water, minerals, vitamin D, and then as we move into a liver detox, understand that the reason why we're focusing on that is because that's going to allow us to detox our gut and do other heavier detoxes, which is later on essentially creating an environment within our body so that we can actually grow probiotics and restructure your immune system, restructure your gut flora. That's the ultimate goal. Once you restructure your gut flora, then you can start following all the hormone protocols that I share, because that's when your gut flora is actually functioning, right? So these are the steps basically that I followed, and it's what I taught in in hormone bootcamp, and I'm basically refining it and just sharing with you guys so that you guys see this as a blueprint and a roadmap, and understand that you don't have to go from where you're at to like the very end in one jump, but you can actually take it one little step at a time, and you just have a vision. You just know exactly where this next step is going to lead you, and how that's going to help you. And you're going to start to understand that like once you start going through like a liver detox, for example, there are things that you're going to be looking for. Like you're going to notice that your body's going to be better at absorbing nutrients. You're going to start to feel like a little bit more mental clarity, right? Liver function it's pretty much tied to like cognitive function. Memory improves, focus improves, concentration, like all these things, right? These are all things that you start to like notice and pay attention to. So all right, cool. So Christina, you get it. That's awesome. Thank you. All right, let's go back, and now we're going to talk about foods. So foods are important when it comes to detoxing your liver and really overall your body. And one of the things that I want to point out through here is, so here's a list of the bad stuff, right? And I'm going to put that kind of like in quotation marks because it's not necessarily so. All right. So gluten, for the most part, the reason why gluten is bad is not so much that gluten itself is bad, is modern day gluten. That's really what's bad. And the reason why it's bad, it's because modern day grains, wheat, corn, soy, have been hybridized and modified in such a way that they've created these proteins, these gluten proteins that are so big and so hard to digest that your body just can't break them down, right? And so again, if you are having allergic reactions to gluten, understand that there's a couple things going on. Number one is the source of gluten, right? Some people will say, oh, just all grains are bad. Well, not really. If you actually go look at heirloom type of grains, if you look at heirloom corn or heirloom wheat, which is einkorn, there's a lot of nutrition. There's a lot of like really good stuff in there. And the gluten is very different. Okay, the gluten is not nearly as hard to digest. But now, again, there are different things that you have to look at. Okay, it's not just the gluten, is what about your ability to digest proteins, right? So a lot of people like to always find fault in things outside of themselves, and they say, oh, you know what, gluten is bad. But just because you eliminate gluten, if you also have a problem with protein digestion, right, which protein digestion can be you're not producing enough stomach acid, maybe you have some sort of bacteria like H. pylori, that keeps you from digesting protein itself, which, these are things that we address when you optimize your microbiome. But, if you still have those problems, even removing gluten is not going to do anything for you because you still have a protein digestive issue. So, here you are, you try eating, say, for example, beef or fish or chicken. If your body can't digest protein, you still have a problem, even if you remove gluten from your diet, right? And so understand that, it's not just, removing foods, but understand why you're removing them. Dairy, that's another one where, kind of going back, the reason why you remove dairy is mostly because a lot of people are used to drinking pasteurized, commercial, conventional type of dairy. Dairy is actually one of the main ingredients that I use for hormone production. But again, if you have allergic reactions to it, it's not so much because dairy is bad necessarily. Again, we have to look at what's the source. Was it conventional, or was it actually coming from a healthy grass-fed, grass-finished cow? And if it's raw, unpasteurized, and whole, right? And if you've had trouble with dairy before, you may not be able to drink even like the good high quality stuff right away. And that's because, again, you now have to look at what is your microbiome like, what is it doing, and even your liver function in this case, because a lot of the things that you're going to get out of dairy is processing the fats and cholesterol, and a lot of that happens in your liver. And if your liver function isn't up to par, you're not going to get nutrients. And if you have, if you lack, if you've been drinking pasteurized milk, chances are that you may not even have the right lactobacillus strains that digest both lactose and, the casein protein, right? So like lactobacillus casei is the strain that breaks down the dairy protein. If you don't have that bacteria in your gut, you may not be able to drink that right away. And so this is part of, restructuring your gut flora, is we got to go in and grow that, that bacteria. And that's when you're able to reintroduce some of these foods. But again, to start out, you want to at least eliminate the bad sources of them, and fasting from them essentially. That's where the word fasting comes in. Fasting is not necessarily just don't eat anything kind of thing. You can just fast from sugar, right? You just don't eat sugar. You're fasting from sugar. You can fast from dairy. You can fast from soy. These are all things. Caffeine. I don't think caffeine is necessarily a bad thing, but again, there's a couple of things. One is we're looking at the source, right? If you're drinking coffee from conventionally grown sources, those are not going to be good. If you get them from like actual like good sources, organic and stuff like that, then you're actually going to get good stuff. But now the reason why we remove caffeine at this time is because you have to understand that with autoimmune conditions and digestive problems, if your body's unable to fully break down protein, you're going to experience a lot of inflammation. Okay, inflammation is basically what happens when your body can't break down protein. It builds mucus around those proteins that are, making it through your gut wall. Through, if you have leaky gut, which pretty much everyone that has autoimmune conditions, that's what's going on there. There's permeability, so it allows undigested proteins to go into the body. The body basically builds mucus around it. That's inflammation. Inflammation is one of the things that causes your adrenals to release cortisol to kind of like, ease down that inflammation. And so caffeine is what affects cortisol. And so this is part of like, we're going to be working with liver function and the adrenals, right? We have to understand these relationships and understand how our body functions as a whole, because it's not just the liver, it's not just the gut, it's not just the adrenals, it's not just the mitochondria, it's not just the thyroid. It's basically everything needs to work together. And you have to understand all of these relationships, which is what we're going to be covering during our 6-week program. And this is why, like, you understand that relationship. So if you cut out caffeine, that's going to allow you to, have your adrenals basically, rebalance its hormone production. right? So that's one of the reasons why during the stage when you're detoxing, you're removing a lot of that. And then obviously there's, alcohol, which that was the one that I had, the hardest time with because I was a brewer and I was basically used to drinking beer pretty much every single day. And so for me to quit drinking beer took a lot, but I realized that, hey, I need to detox my liver. I need to cut out alcohol. And so I need to just, go without. And so like now, like my consumption of it is like very minimum and it's mostly therapeutic, meaning like I now use it more because of the gut health benefits when you do the right type of alcohols, when they're fermented the right way. And again, that's a topic that it's going to be for the for more advanced, for like the more advanced topics once we get into restructuring the gut flora. So be aware of these foods, and so take notes and start to identify, because you're going to notice that if you're at this stage right now where you're barely about to detox, it's not just about taking the Ayurvedic herbs, right? If you take the Ayurvedic herbs, but then you keep all of this in your diet, it's almost like you're undoing, these detoxes, right? So it's important to keep these foods in mind and start going through. This is why it's important to journal your foods, because now you can start to identify, okay, how much gluten do I have in my diet? How much dairy, how much sugar, how much soy, caffeine, alcohol, right? And this is for the liver detox, okay? So identify these foods, make sure that you know where you're being attacked from, and then start I don't say replacing, but adding these foods into your diet. And these are foods, okay, these are foods that I would use whenever I'm going through a liver detox. And this is where, as you start to understand my diet isn't necessarily static, and my diet changes based on what I'm doing. Like if I'm doing a gut detox, I'll change my diet in a certain way to get results. And these are things that I'm a lot of them I'm still researching and trying to find out like what's best for like what detoxes kind of thing. When it comes to liver detox, what I tend to do a lot is these are the foods that I look for. Okay, avocado, coconut oil, basically a lot of healthy fats. And the reason for it is because healthy fats is what helps your body regenerate your liver. Okay, your liver relies primarily on fats. I forget how much coconut oil, but I think I want to say like it takes like almost 3 pounds, like, or maybe it's 3 gallons of like coconut oil to regenerate your liver. Okay, in a period of about 3 months, right? So that's a lot of coconut oil. But if you really want to regenerate your liver, which is something that I actually did, it's actually one of the reasons why I did my plant-based ketogenic smoothie, which was a lot of coconut oil, avocados, hemp seeds. That's where that idea came from, was because I was looking to not only detox the liver, but regenerate it. Things like celery juice, cucumber, lemon. Okay, these are both nourishing and also detoxing foods for the liver, right? So these are kind of like added, benefits. And so the way to think about this at this point is your diet is either going to complement and work in synergy with your detoxes, right? If you start adding these diets, or it's going to work against you. So like if you start taking some of these Ayurvedic herbs, but you're still consuming a lot of sugar, you're still consuming, a lot of caffeine, alcohol, or whatever, some of these sources are, you're undoing the work. Okay. And, my goal here is to help you get more energy faster. And I'm here as a coach more than anything. Okay. I'm not here as a consultant. And basically, the difference there is that I'm not here to do it for you. A coach is more like a gardener. Okay. A gardener, you have a plant. Okay. The plant grows itself. Okay. A gardener doesn't grow a plant. A gardener is just there to make sure that all the conditions are fine, right? Do you have enough water, minerals? Is the pH right? Is the temperature good? Are the probiotics good, right? That's basically how I'm showing up here, is, kind of like a gardener. It's like, okay, you're changing your health. Okay, I'm not doing it for you. You're doing it. I'm just here to check that the conditions are right and letting you know, it's like, okay, you're not drinking enough water. let's get you more water. Okay, you're lacking minerals, let's get you that. That's basically how I'm here. And these are basically the nutrients that I want you to look for as you go through this journey of detoxing your liver, right? And again, for those of you who are participating in Energy Bootcamp, you're going to see that we're going to focus a lot more on these foods. So you're going to be learning a lot more. Sauerkraut is one of the bigger ones. And, sauerkraut is really what I use for fiber at this stage. Fiber has a different use later on when we optimize your microbiome, because that's what feeds bacteria. And this is such an important one that I like to emphasize it over and over. Sauerkraut is already fermented, so the fibers essentially already been used up. Okay, and the way to think of fiber is not only on one hand, it's food for bacteria, but it's also kind of like where they nest, right? So it's kind of like a transport mechanism for probiotics, right? The problem when you're eating fiber, okay, not sauerkraut. Sauerkraut's already fermented. The food's already been digested. It's already been eaten. It's just ready for the body to uptake. But when you eat other sources of fiber, like I see people doing like psyllium, husk powder, or some of these other things, is that if they're doing fiber and they have yet to restructure their gut flora, which again, we're not at this stage yet, we're barely talking about liver function. Fiber feeds all bacteria, both good and bad. And if you've yet to restructure your gut flora, chances are you have more bad bacteria than good bacteria. And doing fiber is actually exacerbating the problems, making it worse because it's feeding the bad bacteria, right? So this is where understanding the order of things and understanding little nuances like these really is going to help you out. And this is why I do these programs. This is why I do, coaching, because if I don't, a lot of people don't understand this stuff, and they do things out of order, and then it doesn't work for them and they give up. And I want you guys to actually see results. They have beets and then green juice. Okay, and green juice is something that we'll introduce, but a little bit, not right away, but it's going to be one of the main keys that we're going to be using throughout the detox protocol. Which again, a lot of the green juices are, I make them primarily with cucumber, celery, parsley, ginger, and some of these other same things that we would use here for detoxing. But it's going to be an overall like good strategy. So I think that's all that I wanted to cover there. Let me go back to Facebook and see if you guys are understanding and seeing the bigger picture of how all of this, it's, for some of you, like you can kind of like see how this is, coming together, and you're starting to see how, by following these step-by-step, process that I'm putting together for you guys, how you're going to, at the end of the day, be able to get to a point where essentially you're creating an environment for you to go in and grow probiotics. And as you start to grow more probiotics, like that's really where you go from worrying about disease, and you now are more focused on improving health, right? And it's a huge difference. Okay, huge difference to operate, when you're going about your everyday life, and you're like, okay, what am I doing today to improve my health? It's a different game, right? Like I'm at a point where my energy levels are good. I'm leaning down. I don't have any problems gaining weight anymore. Whereas before I was just gaining weight nonstop, even if I ate healthy, right? And the reason was because if you have bad bacteria in your gut, even if you eat healthy, the bad bacteria, they eat the nutrients, first of all, in your food. So you're not getting the nutrients. And not only that, they produce a lot of toxic waste, and that toxic waste is what gives you headaches. It gives you that feeling of dizziness. If you've ever felt like, like you're about to like faint, you have no energy, and you have brain fog, and you're just like out of it. That's basically what is happening, right? And when you understand that that's coming from bad bacteria, understand that what allows that bad bacteria to be in your gut to begin with is a toxic environment, which the bad bacteria create themselves, right? So this is the importance of detoxing. Okay, you're detoxing to clean up the environment in your body, in your gut, which reduces the amount of bad bacteria in your gut. And that's really like the first step, because the cleaner your gut is, the easier it is going to be for you to regrow your probiotics. Okay, if your gut stays toxic, it's going to be much harder to grow probiotics, and you're not going to get a lot of the benefits. And so that's why I tell people, like, if you're taking probiotics at that point, sure, you may see a little bit of a difference, but at the end of the day, you're kind of like wasting, a lot of these probiotics, because your focus should be on cleaning first, right? Again, borrowing from the brewery setting, you don't brew a batch of beer on dirty equipment. Okay, you have to clean and sanitize first. You start out with a clean equipment, clean water, good water, brewing water, minerals, good ingredients with nutrients, right? And then when you add water, minerals to the nutrients, now you're able to actually use the nutrients, right? All these grains have bacteria. They're the same probiotics. They're the same thing that actually work in us. Now you're starting to kind of like, essentially, like, it's so funny. When I think about like what I do, is I almost envision myself like I'm brewing inside of my own body, right? It's not just beer that you can brew, but I'm brewing like different things. And I just know that within my diet, the things that I eat, they're essentially growing different types of bacteria. Like when I do a plant-based ketogenic, I'm growing different bacteria than when, I'm doing a more of like a carnivore primal fat burner type of diet. That's like there's different bacteria that are at play there, and they require slightly different environments, right? It's not the same thing to digest protein as it is to digest fat. um, you know Fat requires an environment that you need a lot more minerals, a lot more salt. That's why, like, when people that go keto on a ketogenic diet, they tend to carry a little packet of salt with them, right? So all these things are things you have to understand. And liver function is one of those key things for digesting fat, which, again, at this point, the reason why that is so important and why it makes so much sense that this is the order that must be followed is because right now, this is a transition period from phase 1 to phase 2. Okay, phase 1 is all about water, minerals, vitamin D, right? And we're transitioning to phase 2 where we're detoxing your liver. But understand that vitamin D, okay, if your liver is toxic, your body may not uptake it as good. But you cannot uptake some of these Ayurvedic herbs and like the coenzyme Q10 with a toxic liver either. So you have to like really start out by hydrating, mineralizing, doing vitamin D. And then as you start to detox your liver, your body's going to improve its ability to uptake vitamin D. And as it improves that ability, now it starts to function. Now you start to kind of like get the wheels turning. And this is really where a lot of people experience like that initial transformation where they're like, okay, something's working now. I'm going to keep going. And then from there on out, trust me, like, it's game over. You're now in your habits and you're on your way to better health. So I really hope that this makes sense, that this inspires you, that this, makes you want to, go through this. We are starting Energy Bootcamp on May 1st. So if you're interested in participating, the link is in the description of this live video. I'm seeing to a page where I explain, Energy Jumpstart Kit, which is basically the main ingredients that we're going to be using throughout this program, which is the minerals, vitamin D, the Ayurvedic herbs, and coenzyme Q10. And so in order to participate, basically you have to have, these ingredients and schedule a call with me. I'm only taking a limited amount of people because I'm going to be diving into your guys' diets and really pointing out nutrient deficiencies and other things that you may need. And I have to personalize this because everyone's starting at a different place. And so that's why it's going to be limited. But the last day to schedule a call with me is going to be Friday. Okay, so if you're going to participate, make sure that you schedule your call before Friday. And then Saturdays when we're going to start. Saturday, I'm actually just going to be sending out an exercise for everyone to follow. And we're going to have our actual first, coaching call, which is going to be all done through Zoom. And one last thing that I want to point out, for this, for those of you who don't know, what this coaching program is about. It's not just about this diet part, which is going to be a component of it, but understand that you have to understand there's a detox side, there's optimizing your diet, and then there is the mindset side. And mindset goes into a couple different areas. One is putting you in an environment, okay, when you're around other people who are going through this, you're more likely to actually stick through it because it's not just you. You have accountability, you have other people, and it just creates a positive environment for growth. The other thing is that part of mindset has to do with developing habits where you are managing stress. Okay, and when you're to manage stress, that has to do with, again, normalizing cortisol levels, which at this point, most of you, that's basically what you're experiencing. It's what I experience. It's one of the reasons why your hair falls off. Is basically a lot of cortisol going through your body. And so a lot of these things all of a sudden are going to start to make sense. Once everything comes together, you'll see how you go from a vicious cycle to all of a sudden functioning normal. And this program is basically designed, I'm putting together the best environment, the best education. I'm giving you the best odds at getting through this. So number one, I'm excited for those of you who already know you're going to be participating. I'm going to be waiting for, this is the last week that I'm going to be doing this. And I don't know when I'm going to be offering a coaching session like this again. So I highly recommend that if you want to participate, now is the time to sign up. And that is all that I've got for you guys today. Christina, let's see, what brand of coconut oil, or is it straight from the coconut? Well, ideally, I guess it will be straight from the coconut, but no, I was getting my coconut oil from Dr. Kassar, but I believe that he's no longer selling a lot of his products. So I actually have to go look for a new brand, but I believe that the same brand, this one, Ojo from the Ionic Magnesium, they have a coconut oil as well. I think the most important thing with coconut oil is it has to be, well, there's a source obviously, but then there's different types of coconut oil. You have cold press, explorer press, whatever. The best one is basically centrifuged coconut oil. And once you find this brand, or I guess a brand, I'll have to get back to you as far as what I end up finding. But once you find this type of coconut oil, centrifuge coconut oil, it tastes so much better. The difference in taste is way different. The amount of nutrients, the quality of MCT, medium chain triglycerides, which is the good part of the coconut oil that's in it. A lot of people will get MCT, supplements, and so when you're in a ketogenic diet, that's kind of fuel for your brain, and it's really good. Well, if you get really good coconut oil, you're getting it straight from the source. And centrifuge coconut oil is, basically the best source of it. That's where they get, a lot of these MCT oils that they sell on the market. So that's what I use. So I'll get back to you as far as where I end up buying my next batch. I buy them by the gallon, and I still have a lot. So anyways, man, I've been talking. All right. All right. I'm done. Apparently my voice is out. So I hope you guys got value from today. And that's all I got. I will talk to you guys later. Have a good one.